Aston Martin One-77, a car so rare that even James Bond couldn't have one. The connection between Bond, James Bond, and Martin, Aston Martin, has been called Britain's finest partnership. No single car marque has featured more often in Bond films than Aston Martin, and more importantly, none have featured as prominently, nor indeed complemented the idea of an elegant, intelligent, handsome, and, when called upon, even brutal Secret Service officer. Aston Martins can be all of that too. Of course, the least secret agent in the world had to do with an off-the-rack Aston Martin. Sure enough, he then had that sent off to the most discreet tuning company in the world, Q Branch, to have them breathe upon it. But surely I can't be the only one wondering what goes beyond the ejection seats, rocket launchers, and machine guns. For example, what sort of power Q found in the engine. Are they running steel or carbon brakes? How did they get some weight reduction out of the car? Well, there's an idea for the script writers for the next Bond movie. It could even be set in Tokyo. Go figure, Q Branch.
This video is brought to you by Selected Car Investment, where we buy and sell only the best collectible cars. Check our website to see if your next car happens to be in stock, or contact us for off-market cars, or if you want help to find your next investment.
The first Aston Martin in a Bond movie was in Goldfinger back in 1965, and the DB5 from that movie became synonymous with Bond. And just as the character of Bond evolved, so did the choice of his cars. And the agent has driven the straight sixes, the V8s, and in the later movies even the musical V12s. Even the DB5 from the first movie did sort of come full circle when it returned in the later movies, only now as a classic car. Generally, all of the Aston Martins, with all of the Bonds in all of the Bond movies, came across as matches made in heaven, and indeed Britain's finest partnership. And then there is this one, the 177. And one can't help think about whether the name in itself was a little hint towards what was never to be. 007 in a 177. No, we're terribly sorry, sir. We can't let Q tinker with that car. In fact, the Q branch wouldn't have had to do a lot of work to a 177. While all Aston Martins certainly have a sporty nerve and always were swift cars, none of the former James Bond cars were amongst the fastest cars of the world. Therefore, Bond would always have to rely on a bit of gadgetry, machine gun shields, oil spray cans, invisibility, in order to avoid some villains. But with the 177, Aston Martin really outdid themselves in the power game. The V12 now featured a huge displacement of 7.3 litres, making it the largest engine ever fitted to an Aston Martin. Similarly grand was the power output, now a colossal 750 horsepower, making it the most powerful naturally aspirated car of the time. And as an end effect, the fastest Aston Martin ever by some margin. In fact, with this one, James Bond would just be able to outpace the villains. And we haven't even mentioned the design, which is pure Aston Martin perfection. Back in 2009, the DB9 was still the current Aston Martin, and that model was universally praised for its modern and sensual elegance. The 177 design struck a perfect balance between keeping enough family resemblance to never be mistaken for anything else than an Aston Martin, and still being so obviously more muscular, aggressive, and just plain spectacular. Without being too much, mind, that wouldn't be very British, would it? Surely the 177 was just what Bond wanted. But with just 77 cars made, he he did not make the cut. And if he had, I guess only 76 would be left. So personally, I think this was a good call by Aston Martin. In fact, the big question simply is the 177 peak Aston Martin? I would be very interested in knowing your opinion on that matter. To judge the 177 by its sheer beauty alone would be to do it deeply unjust. However, there is no denying that it is the striking appearance one gets as a first impression when you see this magnificent machine. Even though the design by now is 15 years old, it has, in my opinion, not been bettered by any Aston Martin, nor indeed by any other cars. In fact, even though I did not want to dwell on the design for this video, I just can't help it. The 177 is just exquisitely proportioned, perfectly detailed, and just sits with such a determined stance. And incredibly, it also balances that fine sword's edge between elegance and brutality with such a finely judged finesse that is rarely seen, making it timeless too. But what lurks beneath those shapes? Is there more to it than just beauty? Indeed, a similar beauty as in the much more mundane DB9. Well, yes, even though resembling the DB9 as a family member, beneath it is a completely new chassis featuring all carbon fiber construction. And a very elaborate one too. Some carbon fiber tops resemble just that, a simple top. Aston Martin seemed to be inspired by the classic racing car construction of the past, embracing all the fancy technology with beautiful tubing, bracing and details all around. Indeed, legend has it that one customer asked for 2 cars to be delivered, one with a full bodywork for driving and another as a bare chassis, so he could just admire the technology of that. It is strong too, and it had to be. For the 177, the usual 6-liter V12 would not do the job, so Aston Martin handed that engine over to the engineers at Cosworth or Formula One fame. They re-engineered the engine to 7.3 liters and 750 horsepower, which would just have twisted and bent the original steel chassis. But not the carbon chassis, which managed to be lighter as well. The same applied to the engine. Even though it was bigger and stronger than the 6-liter, the technicians at Cosworth still managed to shed 15 kilos of engine weight as well. Interestingly, the 177 also nods towards Aston Martin's past with the choice of aluminium for the bodywork. Aluminium has been the material of choice for coach builders since the 30s, but here it deliberately shows off Aston Martin's skills in bodywork. Aluminium probably also allows for a tad better finish than carbon fiber bodywork, but not least it connects the past and the present of Aston Martin just beautifully. This all came together in 2009, where it gave us the fastest Aston Martin ever, a top speed of 220 miles per hour or some 350 kilometers per hour. And it is one of the rarest Aston Martins too, and let me just say this again, also one of the most beautiful. So the Aston Martin 177 is the perfect car, right? No. Dare I say it? Then it would not be a true Aston Martin. The snake in the paradise here is the gearbox. Oh yes, the gearbox. It's a 6-speeder but an automated manual one, and it was even back then criticized for being rather slow-witted. While it was not a match for more modern gearboxes, it did still allow the 177 to accelerate from a standstill to 100 km per hour in 3.7 seconds. So it did do the job. just not as well as it could have done. Had the 177 been a true manual gearbox car, maybe it would have been more in character with the 177's cocktail of traditional and modern values. In fact, this is just what Aston Martin did themselves with the final iteration of the 177, the 2020 one-off called Aston Martin Victor. The Victor did get a 6-speed manual gearbox, thereby creating a brute in a suit and proving that it could be done. So here's an idea to you. If your gearbox of your 177 bothers you too much, then take your car, hand it back to Q at Aston Martin and ask them to convert it into a proper manual. In conclusion, even the 177 is not the perfect supercar. But in my opinion, it does come really, really close. And I don't think Aston Martin have bettered it ever since. The 177 is a rolling sculpture of a modern supercar. Perhaps the best looking Aston Martin ever. And in fact might just be peak Aston Martin, imperfection included. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please do hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. And now we've been talking about the 177, my favorite Aston Martin. I would like to know, what is your favorite Aston Martin? Please do comment below. Oh, that was a long one. Now it's time for martini. Anyone want to join?
Yes, please. Shaken, not stirred.
Right answer.